Good evening, afternoon, morning, night, whenever you find a way to watch or listen. This is Omar on a Friday that I have off. So I'm waking up early, even on my days off. There's no days off. Just kidding. I'm going to sleep right after this. But I'm joined by the Rev, Dustin Helton, host of Around the UAC, which I guest starred on, I think all the way back in September. Seems so long ago. I mean, that was like beginning of the season. But the biggest SFA, Stephen F. Austin fan on the internet, we're talking about a United Athletic Conference topic, one that I honestly needs to steal more headlines because I'm just excited. Can it be November 18th already? But Dustin, thanks for coming on. How's everything going?
Oh man, everything's good. Thanks for having me. Glad to return, I guess, the favor after you came on around the UAC earlier this year, which was a lot of fun. And yeah, I can't believe that's already 2 months ago. The season's already flown by, and we'll have FCS playoffs bracket, the week after next. It's insane.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm glad we're doing this. I'm glad it's not recorded live because, I got a lot of Holy Cross trash talk, and of course, we of course, everyone's talking about USC's Swiss cheese defense. I don't think I've seen a worse run defense this year than Holy Cross, honestly, because it's funny that Matt Sluka ran for 300 yards against Lafayette, but still somehow lost because Lafayette's running back ran for 200 and everything. But it's all love with the Satyrs. Of course, allegiances will be split this weekend, for the Holy Cross Army game. So I win either way. I
Yeah,
can't lose this weekend.
I was gonna ask you, who are you rooting for? Because I mean, that's gonna be a tough pill to swallow if Army loses to Holy Cross, but at the same time, Army's bad this year. Holy Cross is better than them, so
We beat Air Force, but the thing is, it's like you can't hurt me anymore as an Army fan because like the point that you couldn't hurt me anymore is when Army lost to Yale at the Yale Bowl in 2014. I'm just thinking like I'm like thinking like these guys had a celebration game for the centennial of the Ale Bowl. They invited us. We were supposed to win. Like
yeah,
we brought fans to the Ale Bowl and they embarrassed us in overtime. Tyler Vargas still gives me nightmares, man. I mean, I hear that game, I get I just get nightmares but that was the point where you just couldn't hurt me anymore. We also lost to Fordham too when I
well,
was
you gotta watch out for those nerds, man. Those nerds come to play whenever it's football time.
And that's the thing. It's like with Army joining the conference, joining another American, United Athletic Conference, we're just covering all the patriotic conferences. But with Army joining the American, they said they want to do a Power Five and a FCS game every year. So like, I'm all for like, I mean, sometimes like those I guess Patriot League games got annoying because I remember like there's one time my sophomore year where Harvard it was a Harvard Yale game at Fenway, and I wanted to go that weekend, just like take a trip to Boston, take a bus to Boston, but I couldn't because the whole Corps of Cadets has to be at every home game. We are playing Colgate, even though this is the best Colgate team since like the early 2000s, in 2018. But like I was like, man, like these Patriot games suck. But then like other weeks, I'm like, you know what? It's cool to have Lafayette come to the crib and everything because like these are rich, these are programs with rich traditions that a lot of the Corps of Cadets doesn't understand. But I enjoy these games.
Yep.
But yeah, going on to back to another, I guess we covered three actually. Yeah, three patriotic conferences: Patriot League, UAC, American. Going back to the main conference we're talking about, the main team. So there was speculation, I think after last week's games, that the CW would have a double header, which is great for that network. I mean, they've produced a good slate of games, honestly, a good slate of like nationally impactful games. There's a double header, and one of the games that was rumored to be on the double header was Florida State UNA. And of course, that is happening. I mean, the Monday came and they made the selections, and excuse me, and UNA and Florida State will be getting the bright CW lights. And I think it is the primetime half of the doubleheader, given that Florida State is the number three team in the CFP. So, I mean, Dustin, you are the UAC, you carry the flag for the UAC. How big is this moment for the conference?
I mean, it's cool that in the first year we're on a game that, or we're on a network that's not ESPN Plus, right? That we're on something that's going to get either regional or national coverage. Um, you know, Unfortunately, it's one of those games that's probably not going to be a competitive game, but it's still a way for the UAC to advertise who they are. I'm sure there'll be conversations about how the UAC used to be, as members of the WAC and the ASUN who came together for football. There might be talk of the fact that the UAC is adding in schools like West Georgia. So I think from a marketing perspective, it's good for the conference. I think from a competition perspective, that game's going to be over pretty quick, but you never know because Florida State has had their troubles against FCS schools. We all remember Jacksonville State going in there and beating them, and Jacksonville State wasn't that great of a team that year, but neither was Florida State. And so now this is a different game with Florida State being ranked so high. So but and it also too for the kids playing, man, it's a great opportunity for them to go play, under the bright lights at Doak Campbell. They're gonna, get to be in, what's a great environment to go watch a game. If you've never been to Tallahassee to watch a game, I highly recommend going, and I highly recommend going across the street and going to watch Florida A&M also whenever they're home. Like both environments are great for games. So I think it's gonna be cool for them. It's gonna be good publicity for the conference, and it's always good to have a game that's not on streaming on ESPN Plus.
I mean, I totally agree. But I guess a note on streaming. I mean, streaming is great, but I think we haven't hit that genesis where like everyone's there. It's kind of like we're still like kind of like in the middle where like people still love cable and whatnot, and there's that consolidation. But I mean, the CW, great spot for sure. It's in 100% of homes. You just have to have an antenna. It's a one-time
Yep.
fee. It's not a monthly fee. Unless you finance your antenna, then that would make it a monthly fee. But I don't recommend financing a television antenna.
Hey
I
man,
once
no
saw I
judgment.
once no judgment, no
No
judgment. I
judgment.
once
No
saw
judgment.
something about financing a pizza, and I think it was like a Twitter account called Bad Financial Takes. It was like, do not finance a pizza. So you
Oh
never
man.
know. You never know. But yeah, like I mean, the CW, like people watch these games for sure. Like even I guess I won't say like the low point, but like the least watchable game, VMI NC State got 205,000 viewers in week 3, and this was 4 times the viewers of Tulane Southern Miss on ESPNU. So people will watch these games if it's
Yeah,
accessible.
it's going to be on in bars. It's like, you go to a bar, especially a bar that has multiple TVs, it's going to be on one of the TVs, right? It's like a bowl game in early December. Like I mean, I don't know how many folks actively will be at the bar watching it, but it's going to be on. And that's cool too, because someone's going to sit there, look up and go, "Oh, North Alabama, never heard of them," right? Or, oh, or you might have some, Florida State, because they have such a national diaspora, they'll be at the bars watching the game. So, I mean, it's good. It's a good thing to have the game there. I'm glad to see Florida State's playing up to as they get to the end of the year. I mean, really tough competition for them. Way to go, Seminoles.
Yeah, I remember. I think it was like 2017. Like they did the exact same thing, but with Delaware State. Just Delaware
Mhm.
State disappeared on the schedule like in November. And it's like, come on, guys. Like we know what you're doing. Like
You're paying to keep your bowl eligibility that you don't need, but it's money for UNA. That's always a
yeah,
good thing, right? You get paid. I don't know what they're getting paid. I didn't see what the contract was. You assume $500,000 probably. Let's just say in that range, right? That's enough to replenish pads, to replenish equipment, to do things like that, and that's always a good thing for a school, especially UNA, who is still, they're not still transitioning anymore, but they're still pretty fresh to Division One. So that, I mean, that money is going to always be a help.
exactly. On a note with UNA, so looking at the teams in the UAC, I think UNA has the biggest national pedigree. They've won multiple national titles, had multiple national title game appearances in the Division 2 level. Do you think this will help the viewership? Or I guess you interact with UNA fans way more than I do. Do they still kind of like pride themselves as like this flagship program of the UAC?
I mean, they're not the flagship program of the UAC. They know that, but there's some good UNA fans. They have a pretty rabid fan base, and in Division 2, they had 3 national championship titles. They were in the playoffs most year. Hell, the last year they were in Division 2, they were in the national championship game, and they lost to Northwest Missouri State, I think. They have a very rich program. They're kind of like Central Arkansas. When Central Arkansas came to Division 1 in 2008, they brought with them just all the success that they had in Division 2, and it turned around for them right away. The first year Central Arkansas was in the Southland, they won it outright, and they couldn't play in the playoffs because of the NCAA stupid transitioning rules that don't make sense. North Alabama hasn't seen that same success since they moved up. This year's been a rough year for them. They're going to finish, we assume, 3-8, because I don't see them beating Florida State's, but still a 3-win. I will say a 3-win year for them is better than I thought they would get this year out of first-year coach Britt Dearman. But Dearman is a great coach. I will say another coach in the conference gave me crap for crapping on him earlier this year, and I ate my words. Right, I said I thought they were going to be 0-11. They were just going to be not anything in the conference, and Dearman knows how to win. He did it when he coached at Bethel. He was a great offensive coordinator at Florida Atlantic. You know, he's a winner. If there's anyone who can build that program up to, maybe they're not going to be a national championship contender because it's a lot harder to win national championship at FCS. Don't let North Dakota State fool you. But they'll be a playoff team. I think in 3 years, they're going to be one of the teams that's competing for the UAC title every year, and looking at a playoff bid, because they do have the facilities. You know, they're getting the resources, but they've got a coach who knows how to win.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Yeah, especially the facilities. Like they got that new stadium coming up. They're not in the stadium owned by, I think, is it the high. I think someone told me and set me straight when I thought that they should demolish the stadium. Like, no, that's owned by like the
That's a
high
high
school
school.
district.
Yeah.
So I was like, my bad, my bad. But yeah, the facilities is a huge one as well. Which like I know like when they released the news on that, I was quick to say like, oh, are they trying to go to Conference USA? But I guess, you don't have to be trying to go to Conference USA to build a new stadium as an FCS team. Like you just build a new stadium.
No, I mean you need facilities to recruit kids, right? And if you look at Division 1 in Alabama alone, you know, they're going against Troy, Jacksonville State, they're going against UAB, not to mention that, you know, Alabama, and Auburn, but they also have Alabama A&M, Alabama State, Sanford. So there's a lot of Division 1 schools in a very, very small area. And you look next door in Georgia, you've got, you know, Georgia Tech, Georgia State, Kennesaw State, now West Georgia coming in. You know, you've got all the schools in Tennessee and you got schools in Mississippi. So that's a very fertile recruiting ground, and they have to be competitive in that ground. And so putting the money into the facilities is one of the things that's going to help them do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, you mentioned like a lot of like rich recruiting grounds, and I mean, yeah, like West Georgia. I mean, they have all the makings of a team that that will compete immediately in that area for sure. I want to ask a question, just going back to North Alabama, Florida State. Do you think if North Alabama gets embarrassed, it's particularly bad for the conference, or do you think that any publicity is good publicity?
I don't think it's bad for the conference as a whole. I think there's expectations that you have to meet here. I mean, North Alabama, they've got a good quarterback in Noah Walters. You know, they've got a pretty solid offensive core. You know, they're not a bad team. They're just, their defense is the questionable thing, and that's where I think they're gonna have issues with this game. But when you look at you know, individuals, like just individual, they got Demarcus Lacey at running back. Man, he's had himself a good year. He's got about, I think, 600 yards rushing. Like I said, you got Noah Walters playing quarterback. You got Takiri Kennebrew as their top receiver. Like, they've got some weapons. It's crazy to me how they had last year the best running back in FCS on their team, and he transferred out. And I think if they still had Derek Powell, it could be a completely different game this year. But what's going to get away from them? It's just going to be their defense. Their defense has not been able to keep them in games. Yeah, they did beat Chattanooga earlier this year, which was a great win because now Chattanooga is being talked about being in the playoffs and they're being ranked in the top 25. But they've hung in with the other teams they played. They've hung in with Austin Peay. They've hung in with Central Arkansas. But it's just not going to be enough when they play Florida State. But to that point, I think the expectation is that this is one of those. It's gonna, it's like when you watch a game in early September. There's not an expectation that it's going to be a competitive game, but if you get a competitive game out of it, then hell, it's bonus. It's a bonus to watching the game, right? And you never know. Any given Saturday, something can happen. But I'm not one of the guys who would go bet the money line on this game for UNA. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I don't think it's going to be close, but I think it's still going to be a good thing for the conference because there's other marketing. They can show their commercials. They can show the things for the UAC schools. UNA can advertise during the game too. And that's always a win because this level of football doesn't get the national coverage that it deserves, with the exception of folks like Sam Herder and the Blue Bloods and things like that. And so anything is a W to help out.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, for sure. Like, I mean, if there's moments in the game where they're really competitive, it's great for North Alabama, great for the conference, and of course, advertising is something overlooked. I mean, the university ads, which like I generally like, as a college graduate, like I ignore university ads. I'm like, okay, I mean, you guys exist, that's cool. I mean, but that's definitely huge for the university to advertise that type of thing. I want to transition to playoff talk, which we talked a little bit beforehand.
Mm.
Uh, I guess you were going over the scenario before with the I guess UAC getting two teams in the league in the playoffs. I guess can you walk us through that scenario and your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so there's a key game to watch this week, which is Central Arkansas and Eastern Kentucky, right? Eastern Kentucky started this year out in the top 25. They had two FBS losses, real quick. They had a weird game against Southeast Missouri, and then they finally, then they had a weird, or they got, and then they had a weird game against, Western Carolina, in which they barely lost, and they had a weird game against Southeast Missouri, which they ended up winning. But here's the thing about this game: that's the game of the week to watch in the conference. But there's also Utah Tech and Austin Peay. Austin Peay should win that game. So if Austin Peay beats Utah Tech, they're going to at least clinch a share of the UAC title. And the reason why I say a share is because it depends on what happens with the Central Arkansas Eastern Kentucky game. If Central Arkansas wins, they play Austin Peay next week. And with that game, if Central Arkansas were to beat Austin Peay, then there would be a tie, basically a tie for the title, and the auto bid would go to Central Arkansas because of the head-to-head. If that were to happen, it's going to be very hard to keep an 8-3 Austin Peay school out of the playoffs. So then you have a scenario where you're going to get two teams in. And with some of the way that the rest of the FCS has been this year, there's openings if the Missouri Valley doesn't send 7 teams into the playoffs, which of course is something that could happen too because they're pretty stacked. So to that point, it's going to be a very interesting couple weeks, a very interesting title scenario that we have. Austin Peay, man, I thought at the beginning of the year they would be hanging in for a title. I thought UCA was going to do it because of the weapons UCA has. UCA just hasn't played complete this year, while Austin Peay they look like they've gotten better week over week over week. Like they're getting more comfortable. Mike DeLello is just playing lights out football. He's trying to get himself a spot on Sundays, and it's just going to be really, really interesting to watch these next 2 weeks. I know North Alabama and Florida State are on the CW, but next week, if you can go find it on streaming, go watch Austin Peay and UCA. That's going to be a fun game to watch because there could potentially be a lot on the line with that game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Austin Peay has quietly had a great year, and I know a lot of people tend to write off the UAC, but I mean, honestly, like they've beat whoever's in front of them, really, and like you said, they've looked more comfortable as the year's gone on. They've improved, and they're a team that can make a run. I wanna talk as well. Don't laugh, but the chances of Tarleton State getting it at large. Sorry, I laughed.
They're not. This is the problem with the rule, right? Because they're in transition. This is their fourth
Oh,
year of
crap.
transition. And this is the problem with the rule. And this is the thing I hate. It's the same thing that's impacting James Madison at the FBS level. Like you're punching up in competition. You're not playing down. You're not transitioning down. I could see telling a team, hey, you drop from Division 1 to Division 2. You're not going to make the playoffs because you're coming in with more scholarships. But these are guys who are still basically playing at half of a team that's D2 recruits, right? Coming in, punching up against their division and winning. Why won't you let them in the postseason? Tarleton deserves it. Tarleton's, if the Tarleton were to win out, they would deserve it. But it's funny. There was a thing about that they joined North Dakota State and South Dakota State as the only transitioning teams to have a winning record all 4 years, and that's a really cool thing. But you also have to remember some of those years they were playing D2 opponents and not solely D1. But this year with a mainly D1 schedule, they've looked really good. Todd Witten's done a great job running that team since he went to Stephenville, and he really hasn't had a bad year overall in Stephenville. So I think they're one to look out for in the playoffs next as a potential playoff caliber team next year. It's just amazing with this conference. Like there's so much parity in there with the amount of teams that could be playoff teams next year, because you have UCA who could be a playoff team next year because they're returning so many of their weapons, right? You've got Southern Utah who is getting better week over week, right? They're not going to be able to make the playoffs this year. They won't have enough wins, but I mean, they used to be the laughing stock of the Big Sky, and look at what Coach Delaney Fitzgerald has done and turned them around, right? You've got Austin P. You've got Eastern Kentucky, who it'll be interesting to see what Eastern Kentucky does once they lose Parker McKinney at quarterback, right? Right. You got Abilene Christian, who's just slowly laying there in the weeds in the 500 team, right? You've got Tarleton State. So right there, right off the bat, there's 6 teams that are easily consider that you could consider teams that would come in there and do well. And then you've got SFA, who knows what you're going to get out of them each year, right? It's like they can't pick a year that they have a year with amazing offense and bad defense, or a year with an amazing better defense and bad offense. If they can get the two together, they were a playoff team 2 years ago. They could be back to the playoffs. And then you've got Utah Tech and you've got North Alabama, and neither one of those are bad schools. So there's so much parity in the conference that it's really hard to pick. It's not like some of the other ones where you had like 4 or 5 awesome teams and then 4 or 5 bottom feeders, or the Southland where you have one good team and the rest are bottom feeders. It's a huge, densely packed conference, and that's a good thing too for conference football, because it makes every week's games fun games to watch.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's just a shame that Tarleton's non-conference resume wins over Southwest Baptist and Morehead State won't stand. I'm kidding.
No.
That's not a shot at the schedule.
I
But
know. I mean, so like I said, next year they're eligible. I'd be interested to see what their schedule is. I bet they do have a sub. I think they have a sub D1 on there, but that sub D1s don't hurt you anymore. Apparently, they count. They're not detrimental to your playoff hopes. But to me, I mean, out of conference is out of conference. You want to play a tough out of conference schedule, but you also don't want to schedule yourself out of the playoffs. So, and I think with Tarleton, they've grown that stadium. They got the A&M money coming in. They were making the push that we want to go to Conference USA. They could be a formidable foe in FCS. This may be a nice little area for them to be in, and they're in a good recruiting area. They're just outside of Dallas-Fort Worth, right? It's an easy way for them to grow the program. And so they'll be a fun one to watch over the next couple of years.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if they keep getting just the influx of transfer quarterbacks that they've had, I mean, Stephen Duncan and then now
Yeah.
Victor Gabalis, like I don't know. I don't know what they're doing like to bring these guys to Stevensville. I've never been to Stevensville. I mean, I mean maybe it's a great place to live, but I mean, like
Well,
it's crazy.
Gabalis came from, what was it, Utah Tech last year? He was he was in Utah, and he wasn't, like I said, he wasn't a bad quarterback. It's just transitioning in, they had a rough schedule. They were iron sharpens iron sort of schedule, playing like Montana State and Montana and South Dakota State and all these schools that you knew they weren't going to win. And I think that's helped him some, because he did play some of the top competition in FCS over the past couple of years, and that got him ready for it. So, I mean, Stephenville's not a bad town, but again, it's 90 minutes from DFW. Like, it's an easy place to bring recruits in.
There you go. I mean, I need to get better with my Texas geography for sure. I mean, heck, I live here, but I mean, I'm on the I'm on the far end. So, excuse my lack of knowledge. This is not a shot. That was not a shot at the people of Stevensville. I'm sure they're great people. Uh, maybe I just spoke my way into Tarleton State being like, hey, we'll fly you down here.
Yeah, man. It's an easy flight from the corner of Texas.
But yeah, so I mean that's all I got, Dustin. Do you have anything final to add? I know you want to plug Around the UAC and all the work you do.
Yeah. So more than that, yeah, I do have the Around the UAC, which we do a live show every Tuesday, usually at 7:30, unless I'm traveling for my job. But we're part of the FCS Fans Nation group on Facebook, and part of the FCS Fans Nation or football fans. I can't remember what it is. It's FNN, as we call it for short. But on YouTube, that's where they have multiple shows covering all different sorts of FCS topics. There's South Dakota State's got a couple, Jackrabbit Illustrated in the B team. There's the FCS Fans Nation show on Sundays. I'm not going to name them all, although I should, but go check them out because it's a great group of guys to watch who just love the game and love FCS football. FCS football like I said earlier, doesn't have the national media presence that FBS does. Usually your FCS writers are your local beat writers. You do have guys like FCS Nation Radio, Kevin and Stone Labanowitz doing it on national radio air, which is pretty cool. But then you got Sam Herder with Hero Sports. You've got Zach McKinnell with the Blue Blood. There is some national coverage. Go follow those guys and follow the FCS Fans Nation group, because FCS football, a lot of people dump on it because they think it's still a separate tier from Division One. It's not. It's still part of Division One. It's Division One that truly has a way to settle a national champion, where you have a playoff instead of 87 teams getting a bowl game. Or actually, I think it's like 107 this year, like a stupid number. So, but there's a true playoff, a true 2014 playoff. So watch it. There's some great football at that level. You should definitely check it out.
I mean, shoot, like I definitely agree that the FCS settles the champion the right way, but you don't like unchecked tourism with bowl games. That I won't stand for. I love bowl games.
Man, the
I, yeah,
Bahama Bowls isn't even the Bahamas this year because the stadium's being redone, and so they're playing it in Boca Raton, Florida, or some crap like there. I mean, come on, nobody, come on. I'm sorry.
ESPN can they can't control the Bahamian government or the Bahaman Sports
Yeah.
Authority. That's out of their control. I don't know what to say at that
I
point. That's an
bowl game.
island
I mean,
decision.
I like bowl games. I like seeing the whatever is the who gives a rats bowl in Boise every year, right? Like I do. But my thing is this: if you're a sub 500 team, you should not get a postseason. You should not. And I know there's some instances where that's happened in like the NFL. I know there's some instances where a team has won a conference and done it, and that's a different thing. Like if you manage to win your conference being sub 500, then sure. But if you're a 5-7, I'm going to use New Mexico as an example. I don't know what the record is. Let's say you're 5-7 New Mexico. You don't deserve a bowl. Okay, call your season done because you weren't good enough to finish a 500 or above. It's that simple. At least with the FCS, they do keep for like not the non-auto bids, you have to have 7 wins, right? It's very rare. 7 wins, 6 Division One wins. So it's very rare that you see a team you don't see a team with less than 6 wins, right? So you'll always see a team above 500 unless they somehow win their conference. That's just my thing with the bowls. There's way too many of them. Let's narrow them down a little bit. But also too, put James Madison in a damn bowl. They deserve it this year. That's my other beef. Get them
Yeah,
in a bowl.
100%. No, I agree. I agree, but it's like, hey, if there aren't enough bowl teams, who's going to explain to these chambers of commerce why they can't have, this tourism money? It's
Frisco's got the FCS championship, and they've got the what's it, the Amos Stag Bowl just right up the road. Get over it, okay? Nobody needs the Frisco Bowl.
all right, all right, all right. I'm just saying, I will defend bowls to death. I'm trying to brand myself as a Kornacki of bowls. I'm actually
Uh-huh.
I'm actually publishing my bowl projections after this. Been busy all week, but I mean, I guess all that aside, you're completely right about FCS football and the media that covers it because it's really a labor of love. Honestly, like it doesn't get as much exposure, but it should. But there's just so much programs. Like for me, I'm drawn to the programs with rich traditions, pretty much something that I call like the newspaper era programs, like the Bucknells, the Holy Crosses, the Ivy League schools, and whatnot. The teams that grew their domains and brands through newspapers back in the day, especially this year with the Patriot League. The Patriot League race, I would be fine with Holy Cross not winning the Patriot League this year. I
Holy
might get
Cross
some
doesn't
hate.
deserve to win. Doesn't deserve to win the Patriot League this year.
Give it to Georgetown this year. I do not mind Georgetown making the playoff, honestly, because that is like Georgetown making the playoff is like the Cubs making the World Series, honestly. Like that's a once in a lifetime thing. I'm so and along with Columbia winning the Ivy League. Those are two things that would happen where it's like, if possible, I would drop everything just to witness, because you know. So I mean, but yeah, I mean that's just to say that just the storylines are there in the FCS. There's regionalism I mean, college football is not dead. There's still regionalism. There's rich tradition. It has everything. So you're completely right, Dustin. And I mean, yeah, just they're easy to find. The FCS media is easy to find. Blue Bloods, like you said, Fans Nation, Fans Radio, Hero Sports. I mean, that's a few. And also the beef's been spicy lately. I've been attuned to the Delaware beef, and I am very I don't know why. Like I'm not targeting Delaware fans, but it's just like it just comes in the conversation. It came in our weekly podcast talking about Delaware this week in the CAA, but it's just like I just get rubbed the wrong way by the way that their fans behave. Like so I'll just leave it at that. No more bulletin board material. That would make three podcasts where I've just like continually because
You
I
don't
know
you
it
don't want
gets
to be
heated.
you don't want to be in a hype video this week. Just
I actually do. That would help me a lot. That would help me a lot. I do want to be in the hype video, but it's like okay, I guess if Delaware's making hype videos to beat like, I mean, I'm not gonna say Hampton, but it's like I guess like I'm trying to think of like a new member of the CAA. It's like struggling. I guess A&T. I don't want to pick on A&T, but if they're making hype videos over beating A&T, it's like come on, guys. Like
that's rare.
I don't know what else to say. Like
Yeah.
really like.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all I got to say. I'm off my soapbox, and I've said all I need to say for this podcast. But yeah, thanks again, Justin, for joining. Make sure you tune that dial to the CW, and also next week to the CW next week, but also next week for Central Arkansas versus Austin P, where all the UAC marbles will be at stake. And until next time, everyone, peace, love, and soul.